I'm Bruce Lorincz, and this show is called Bruce on the Loose. I talk to people throughout Wadsworth. Recently, we did shows on the Woodlawn Cemetery. Roger Havens showed us about the restoration of headstones, and Deb Holcomb talked to us about cleaning those same headstones. And really, we have four, and I couldn't believe it, 4 headstones date back to the Revolutionary War era. Quite a story, and if you want to watch WCTV. Those stories and other programs are there. Dr. Andy Hill's with us today, and Dr. Hill, school is just about ready to start. You feel like you're in the starting blocks?
It sure is. We're excited. We're excited to get the new school year off to a start. It definitely, the summer here stays busy with all of the planning and hiring and cleaning and other things that are needed to get the new year ready. But it definitely picks up about 100 notches come August 1st as we get into that last push before our kids return.
The 22-23 school year, how many years will this have been for your superintendency?
Yes, I'm starting my 10th year here, which is hard to believe, quite honestly.
Does continuity, that 10 years, does it help in some ways to kind of project issues right around the corner?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. It definitely does help to have that experience and to have an understanding of the culture, the community, the work within. But I think, the longer that you're at a place can be a double-edged sword too, with maybe complacency and other things that can set in. So I think it's a continual challenge to make sure that our team collectively is pushing forward in positive ways, making positive changes for our kids.
We had Roger Wright on recently with 2 new programs for the 4 Cities Educational Compact. Do some decisions take a while to kind of look at all the angles and how it might impact various communities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely some decisions take more time than others. That program that we're adding, the Diversified Medical Technologies, was something that while we didn't know what the program would be, we knew that when we developed our last strategic plan back in 2020 that we wanted to add a program. So our work on that really started a couple years ago with making that an area of focus in our strategic plan for the next 5 years. And then Roger and his team took that and did surveying of students and conversations. We visited different programs, talked to different people within the areas that kids really had an interest in, and ultimately we ended up with the Diversified Medical Technologies class. So yeah, there was a pretty extensive process and a lot of decisions that we make that have large impact into the future like that definitely take time.
You hinted on staffing. What about the situation in regards to, let's say, substitute teachers, substitute custodian workers, substitute cooks? Do you have enough people in those areas to go forward?
Yeah, so the last couple of years especially have been challenging. We were having challenges in those areas before the pandemic, and then they greatly were exacerbated during the pandemic. I would tell you last year we probably started to see our substitute teacher fill rate on any given day increase. We maybe pre-pandemic were in the 90-94% range fill rate. We were dropping it as low as 70%, 60% during the pandemic, and I think we're back up into the 80s on any given week when we look at our fill rate. But our classified substitute jobs, so the aides, custodians, maintenance, bus drivers, we hover around continuing to do that around 34-35% on a weekly basis for what we're filling when we have openings. So that leads to things like, on the transportation side, we can't leave a bus empty. So we're either consolidating routes on a given day and changing around schedules last minute, which cause disruptions for a lot of people, or we're pulling people like our mechanics and some of our grounds employees and that are qualified to drive a bus and having them drive, which then backs up that log of work in their areas as well. So I think we're starting to see a little bit of a turn, especially when it comes to actually filling the regular jobs. We were having a challenge with that too, especially on our classified side. But we're starting to see where, Steve Moore, our assistant superintendent, has done a phenomenal job with all of these search processes over the summer and even into last spring planning for the year. And we're pretty close to being at full staffing. And just when we think we get there, Steve's reminded that we're never ever going to quite get there. Last week we thought we were there, then we had 2 safe crossing guards retire. So it's just a constant process for us. But we're continuing to look daily for people that may have an interest in picking up either regular jobs that are maybe 2-3 hours a day with some of our cafeteria or playground help, or substitute positions where they'd be able to work as they're able to when we have needs.
It seems like bus drivers really came to the forefront of need. If someone is watching that was a retired truck driver, could we go ahead and get them to drive bus possibly?
Absolutely. We're definitely willing to train if somebody needs it. Somebody that's a retired truck driver probably has less training that would be needed than somebody that hasn't driven something of that nature. But even somebody that hasn't been in transportation as a past career that may have an interest in being a bus driver or even a vehicle driver, we have those as well. We were always looking and always willing to train somebody.
What about the teacher pool? Did we have enough applicants for all the openings that maybe, again, we've looked at some information that some people were retiring early, they just don't want to go through the COVID situation, or they may have health issues, and there are probably some teacher openings. How has that gone?
It's gone well. With our teacher openings especially, we know we're to anticipate a lot of those usually through retirement. We usually have that information in the fall or early winter. And so we really begin that type of a process in February. So, our hiring on the certified side really went into full swing in late January, early February to really get a jump on things to attract, what we hope are the best candidates, to be able to get them locked in and secured. And so we've got a number of them this year between retirements and some other things, but we've been very fortunate to really have a strong candidate pool to make our selections from.
Maybe the parents would be interested in the process. If someone does apply, maybe just out of school or looking to come to this area, maybe with a transfer, what would someone go through the steps to get a teaching position?
Yeah, so the first thing that somebody would do is to submit an online application through a system called AppleTrack, which is right on our website. From there, when we have our openings, Steve Moore, I mentioned earlier, Steve will put together a committee of people for whatever the particular job opening is. That committee usually involves principal or principals of buildings. It will involve sometimes teachers of that subject area or within the building, and then some other administrators as well. And usually, depending on the position, it could look a little different. If we're trying to fill an elementary teacher job as an example, where we're getting 300 plus applications for every position, they'll screen resumes, they'll do a brief kind of screening interview, 10 minutes with those that get selected, and then they'll bring in those that come back for a tabletop interview. If you move beyond a tabletop interview, then it's a teaching interview where you plan a lesson and you teach to actual students, and the team kind of watches that happen. And then they send the finalist, usually at least 2, sometimes more for each position, to me, where I review all of that stuff that's happened prior and background checks, all of that, and then do a final interview with the candidates, and then I consult with the team to make a decision. So it's a pretty extensive process that we have in place. And even on our classified side, that involves a few different interviews in the process as well. So, we do still have a few openings that are available, and if anybody is looking or knows of anybody looking, they can find that stuff readily available on our district website.
Andy, rumor has it that you have quite a poker face and you don't reveal how the applicants have fared. Is that accurate?
That's what I'm told. Listen, I kid around about it, but it's true. I show, emotion is not something that I readily show most times, and so I don't purposefully do it. It's just who I am.
What about the administrative team? Any changes there?
Yes, we've added at our high school level. So Kirk Cresawati, who had been with us for years, is our school attendance officer, retired. And with that, and with some changes in how attendance and other things are done, we've kind of realigned our needs and gone a different direction with filling that position. So in lieu of the attendance officer position, we've added an additional assistant principal at the high school. So Carrie Hampshire has joined us. She's got a long administrative career, most recently in Rittman. I think she'll be a phenomenal addition to that high school team. But that gives us the ability, the team will be responsible for student attendance, but that also helps us with evaluations and supervision and a number of other things.
I knew her when she was in Worcester, and she's very organized, and she's really a nice addition to the administrative team.
Yeah, absolutely. We're thrilled to have her here.
Dr. Hill, I notice all over town that there's houses being built, Hartman Road, and a couple on my particular street and all over. Does it ever worry you that Wadsworth is growing at a gradual rate, but to the point where we don't know the kids and maybe they fall through some cracks?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I would tell you the answer to that particular question would be no, because and here's the reason why. Going back to what I mentioned before at the beginning, our team is continually looking at and reevaluating where we are, and one of the big things that we look at on a regular basis is what are the needs of each of these kids that we have here in the school district. So we have roughly 4,500 kids, pre-K through 12th grade, and we have people that work with those kids on a pretty, close level daily. And if we see that we have gaps in what's needed, those gaps are being communicated to the right people, and we're having the right conversations about those. So, I don't worry about it, because I trust that our team, and when I say team, our team is the 650 plus employees that make up this school district. I trust that our team will be communicating what's needed so that we can make sure that we're adequately positioned and staffed, programmed, etc., to meet the needs of those kids.
A group of the team that I think really does yeoman's work for all districts, but especially Wadsworth, is our counselors. We did a show recently with Kathleen Pato talking about foster children, and she really went out of her way to say how great the counselors have been in getting those students at grade level and helping them out. We talked about all the new houses, a lot of people moving in. The counselors are really helpful in getting those kids comfortable, aren't they?
Yeah, they absolutely are. We have a great school counseling team here in the district, and it's expanded. When not many years ago, we had counselors that would split time between 2, sometimes 3 buildings, and our elementary buildings would have maybe 1.5 days of a counselor assigned there per week. To opening up this coming school year, every elementary now will have a full-time school counselor. Our intermediate school has 2, middle school has 2, and the high school has 5. And we've made those changes because of the changing needs of our kids and the importance of the job that the school counselors do with working with students, helping them through problems, with the important lessons that they provide in the classroom. Just the list of what they do is pretty extensive, and the need for them is also extensive. You know, we started to see some changes in behavior and other things at our youngest levels pre-pandemic, and we've only seen those continue to grow as we've worked through this pandemic over the last couple years. And you know, it's pretty clear to us that while our main responsibility that the community has put their trust in us to do is to educate kids, if we're not addressing the needs that kids are bringing with them to school every day, they're not going to be able to learn to their best potential. And so the work that our school counselors do, the work that our community partners do that are in the buildings too, we have some licensed therapists from Red Oak Behavioral, from Belfair, Ohio Guidestones partners with us with some preschool work. All of that stuff, you know, we're adding for this year a student well-being mental health coordinator, Sarah Capaco. All of that is trying to provide the support that we believe is needed for kids to help them be able to optimally learn, so that when we're looking at those learning outcomes and the community's looking at things like state report cards and other stuff, that's actually representative of what kids can learn and not representative of other things that are happening that are impacting that learning.
Andy, I know you were instrumental in opening the door for our resource officers as well to be in the building. And I think over time they have really gotten to know the students, and they are a key in students coming forward to reporting things that they're seeing maybe at their house or down the street. And I'm sure it's kind of a two-way street. They help the schools, but they are also helping law enforcement.
Yeah, I think so. I would hope that that's viewed that way. I know that schools definitely view it that way. And you know, that's a great example of a partnership between, you know, the City of Wadsworth and our schools. You know, that program kind of unofficially started, I think, the year before I started here, with Adam Innocente kind of as the first resource officer. And by the way, he was just recognized with what was called a Master School Resource Officer Award in this past spring. But it's grown. You know, we've Dan Schonk does a phenomenal job. Ben Smith's with us and does a nice job at our high school as well. And you know, the city was willing. We went and made a request to council for consideration in 2018 after we had a big community forum on school safety that late winter, early spring after the incident in Florida that happened. And city council was willing to put another school resource officer here by splitting the cost with us. And you know, so it's just they do a phenomenal job. We're so fortunate to have them in our schools. I can't thank them enough for the job they do. But I also can't thank Wadsworth City Council, the administration, and others for partnering with us to actually make that happen and make it a priority.
Andy, you gave me a good segue with the partnership. COVID-19, you probably didn't have too many classes at the graduate school or superintendency sessions about COVID-19. You had to kind of learn as things were changing, and they were probably altering each and every day how schools was impacted by that. How about the Medina County Health Department, the city, the other school districts? How did you coordinate with all those groups?
Yeah, you know, that so the only way I think you get through what I've learned is that I think the only way that you get through something like that is through collaboration. Yeah, collaboration has always been an important part of what we try to do. But when you go through something like a pandemic, it just becomes even more important to the overall process. So, you know, some of the partners that you mentioned, the other school district superintendents, myself, would meet weekly with Krista. For the better part of 2 years, she took time every week on Tuesday mornings to meet with us, to give us updates, to answer questions, to be available. She she was available basically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because there was always some unique situation that didn't quite fit into the guidelines from the Ohio Department of Health that we would need to consult on to get opinions on.
And that's on top of what she was doing
Yeah.
during her day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's a lot of mixed emotions that people carry from what we've gone through the last 2 years, especially as it relates to guidelines and other things that were put in place by the Ohio Department of Health that we were left to follow. But I would tell anybody, I've said it a number of times before, and I'd say it a number of times more if needed. I don't think we're able to get through, and I'll just use we for Wadsworth. I would imagine my colleagues would feel the same way, but I'll just speak for me. I don't think we get through and are able to do in-person instruction like we were able to do during those 2 years for the bulk of the time if we didn't have a health commissioner like Krista Wasowski. While her job was to make sure that the guidelines from ODH were followed, she very much worked within those to help us figure out ways to make things happen and to allow us opportunities that maybe other places didn't have the opportunity to do. And so, for that, I'll be forever thankful, just because that gave us the ability to be able to have kids here in person, which after that initial online experience, we knew for the majority of our kids is what was best and needed to happen. And so, that collaboration, though, between the superintendents, between Krista and, for years we've collaborated with the City of Wadsworth, with administration, with council, and, long before I was here. And this facility we're in is a perfect example of it, of great vision, of great collaboration to work together. And, I guess my hope is that that type of collaboration continues long after I'm gone too, because I think ultimately our kids benefit from that here in this community, and the community as a whole benefits when everybody's kind of working together in unison.
Not a lot of other communities have a facility for shows for the governmental, schools, and community like WCTV. I was amazed. I attended Cable Commission, and thousands of people view our choir concerts, and of course football and wrestling. The community really uses this facility and what some of the volunteers and the producers develop.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've mentioned this before a number of times too. I didn't grow up in Wadsworth. I grew up in a different community. I've worked in a lot of other places. From those experiences, I can understand how unique what's offered here is. And I can also understand and appreciate, whether it's WCTV, Wadsworth Community Radio, or other services, I can appreciate the fact that if we wanted to do something like this, as an example, when I was high school principal up in Toledo, we would have paid top dollar to be able to get our word out to our community through TV, through radio, and other things, and it's here. It's here for this community. It's here for our schools, and it's here for all of these other organizations and others to be able to do. So, it truly is. I call it a treasure. It really is, and I think for people that have always just known this is what it is, I would tell you that while it's probably not unique, it's also more unique than normal to have this type of thing.
Very true indeed. Thank you for that commentary. What about the CIS building? We talked in the fall about the necessary of election in the fall and got a 5th and 6th grade building through. What is going to happen? A lot of people ask me, what about the old Central, the old high school, and do we have any plans for that?
Sure. So as far as the new building, I remember that show well, Out on Site, and we're at in that. We're kind of on the tail end of finishing up the schematic design phase, And I think it's pretty typical when you go through a phase like that you then work through some budgeting issues to get yourself back from where you want to be to what the reality is with the great gift the community has given us with that bond issue to be able to build. So we are working through that right now, kind of making changes to the design and some other things to get ourselves within budget, because as you can imagine, we're dealing with some pretty high numbers that are a lot higher than maybe what typically would be expected with the current environment. But we're going to be okay. And I think right now we're on target to break ground probably sometime next spring, maybe in May. And we're still on target for that building to be open by August of 2025, which has kind of been our target all along. So it's going well. The other part of your question about the current facility, so that CIS committee years ago now, 6-7 years ago, whatever it was, part of that recommendation was to find somebody that the board could sell to the building to, following the rules and regulations in the revised code, because we can't just sell it to anybody. There's processes that have to be followed, but find somebody that would be willing to buy it and use it for community use at work, at minimum OJ Work Auditorium. So we have not gotten into that part in great detail yet, but that continues to be the aspirational goal of what the board is working towards when we do. And I would imagine timing-wise, with being about 3 years away from the new facility, that within the next year, it's probably going to kick into high gear for us to start having those conversations, to start engaging community and others in that process. But we had some interesting ideas with the architect that were on display last year during that campaign in the fall, the information sessions we did, just to give an idea of what it could become with OJ Work or other things, and kind of tying into the City of Wadsworth's visioning plan, et cetera.
Well, Dr. Andy Hill, I learned a lot today, and I'm sure our community will learn a lot as well. And good luck for the school year coming up. It should be very exciting.
Thank you, Bruce. It's great to see you. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for viewing, and we'll have some additional shows in the future.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.